We worked on divergence, but that's only part of the creative process. We also have to be effective convergent thinkers. Here's a novel idea. This is an idea for wheelbarrow. Now, when I show this wheelbarrow to most groups, what kinds of reactions do you think I get? It's backwards, handle's too short, too deep, won't work. That's how most folks react to this idea. If that's how we react to a novel idea, if this was an idea that I was trying to carry forward, what do you think would happen to this idea? S-canned, right? The reality is this is a real wheelbarrow. It exists. But what we tend to do is we tend to judge it against what we know a wheelbarrow to be. Not so deep, the wheel in the front with long handles that we pull up on. This is a wheelbarrow that was designed by someone who works in high steel construction. Why? Because in high steel construction, you're in confined spaces. With a traditional wheelbarrow with the wheel in the front, you need quite a wide turning radius in order to maneuver. So with this wheelbarrow, rather than lifting up, you push down on it. You push down on it, and you push it forward. With the wheel in the back, you have a very tight turning radius. This guy thought, hey, I've got a wheelbarrow. I'm going to go to a wheelbarrow manufacturing company. I'm going to sell this idea to that company. What do you think they said when he presented his idea? You're crazy. So he went into business on his own because it's got a unique application. It's a niche market. He was able to sell it for 10 times the cost of other wheelbarrows, and because it's a very simple design, the manufacturing cost is about half of what it costs to produce a traditional wheelbarrow. So the reason why I share this is that we have to be careful how we respond to novel ideas, especially if we're going to invite people to think divergently. If they come forward with unique ideas and what we do immediately is slam them, we start to teach people we really don't want their ideas. So on the convergent side, we need some guidelines to help us, just as on the divergent side. Here are 4 rules that can help us with convergent thinking. The first rule is to use affirmative judgment. So rather than slamming an idea, first look for what's good about it. Are there some positives to that idea? So evaluate it in an affirmative manner. We want to stay open to novelty. We don't want to reject an idea just because it doesn't fit our paradigm. We got to be realistic, so we got to make sure it meets our objectives, and we need to evaluate it in a deliberate, systematic way. Now, here's a tool. We're going to try this tool out when we go to our seminars. And oh, by the way, we did brainstorming. We used those 4 divergent rules to practice on a bathtub. When we get into our seminars, we're going to practice that skill of divergent thinking on something real, because it's most difficult to be divergent in your thinking when you're working on something real. Bathtubs is easy. End of the day, who cares? Right? But when you're working on something real close to home, it's more difficult to think divergently. We're also going to practice a convergent tool. We're going to practice this when we get into our seminars. It's called PPCO, pluses, potentials, concerns, and overcoming those concerns. What you're going to do is we're going to give you a task. We're going to say, here's an idea, here's a solution, here's something that's being implemented. Let's evaluate it. So first you look at the pluses. What are the good points, the strengths, the positives? This is a systematic evaluation tool. You always start with the pluses first because it sets a more positive tone. Then we go to potentials. Potentials are very important because you want to look at what might be some of the downstream things that might occur as a result of pursuing this idea. So we're not just evaluating it here and now, but we're looking downstream. So what are future spin-offs, possibility, novel things that might happen as a result of pursuing this idea? In convergent thinking, you need to be realistic. You have to point out the shortcomings. What are the weaknesses, the trouble spots? But, and this is really important as a leader, one of the things that we strongly recommend is when you express a concern, you put it in the form of a question. Rather than saying, the wheel's in the wrong place, this wheelbarrow looks like it's going to be difficult to maneuver, that feedback really doesn't help me. By putting your concern into the form of a question, like how to make this wheelbarrow easier to maneuver, if you as a leader say that to me, what does that then require me to do? Requires me to think. Exactly. When you end a statement with a period, we call it a period for a reason, full stop. When you end a concern with a question mark, it encourages a response. So when we're going to express our concerns, when we're evaluating an idea, this is a great leadership tool. Phrase it as a question. How to? How might? You know, how are we going to do this? Tell me about this. How might we make this easier to maneuver? How are we going to get this to fit into our budget? How are we going to get so-and-so to buy into this idea? And then our last step in the PPCO is to overcome the concerns. So you go back to your list of your concerns. It's not written on here, but you prioritize them. You rank them. You say, okay, what's our biggest concern? Okay, our biggest concern is number 5. What are all the ideas we can come up with to overcome that concern? Okay, so we're going to practice this tool and the brainstorming tool when we get into our seminar sessions. Okay? All right, so let me end with this. We talked about what gets in the way of people being creative, those self-imposed constraints. We talked a little bit about process, that divergence and convergence. Let me talk a little bit about environment because that's so important, and it ties into the theme for today. This comes from a research study done by a Swedish researcher named Göran Ekvall. He worked for Volvo, a car manufacturer. Oh, gosh, now he started there about 40 years ago. And his job was to go look at idea systems, idea management systems. So he would go around from manufacturing site to manufacturing site looking at employee suggestion systems. How successful were they? Were employees sharing lots of ideas? Were the suggestion systems working? Were the ideas being implemented to reduce costs or to improve profits? And what he found is as he went from one plant to another plant, some plants were very successful. They had almost 100% participation. Almost every employee was participating. Lots of ideas were coming forward. And then he would go to other plants, and what he would find, few ideas were coming forward. Few ideas were being implemented. And he wondered why. And what he discovered was it was the climate. It was the psychological atmosphere. It was the culture created in that plant that either encouraged the flow of ideas or inhibited a flow of ideas. This is one of the big themes that Bay talks about in that article that you read on creativity in the military, creating a culture that encourages ideas. And what Ekvall discovered is that when a leader encourages these 10 things, except for conflict, you're more likely to get subordinates to come forward with ideas. You're more likely to find an idea-rich environment. So challenging people, challenging them to find new ways of doing things, providing some autonomy to define for themselves how they're going to approach a problem, providing idea support, being attentive and affirmative when responding to ideas, building an environment of trust. Dynamism refers to energy. Is there a lot of energy in the environment? Is there some degree of playfulness? Good humor relaxes people, the stress buster that was referred to before. Is there some room for debate? Now, in the military, you don't always want debate, right, because it's going to challenge command. But at some points, maybe it's appropriate for disagreements to come forward, because what it does is it challenges thinking, challenges paradigms. Conflict refers to personal attacks, so you want to reduce personal attacks. Risk-taking refers to, is it okay to try something new, to try something that's a bit uncertain? And the big area, and this was referred to earlier, is there time to think? Idea time. If there's not time to think, then you're not likely to come up with something new. You're likely to do what you've always done. What impacts this? Oh, I should share this quickly. This study looked at corporations and whether they innovative, stagnated, or average, and had the employees rate their environments on challenge, freedom, idea support, and so forth. Interesting thing about the study, when they went back 5 years later, and you see the numbers here, the organizations that were considered to be innovative by the team of economists versus those that were stagnated, you can see quite a large discrepancy in terms of points. 25 points is a statistical significant difference. And you can see on every case except for conflicts, they're pretty large, more than 25 points. Sad thing behind this research study, it was supposed to be a longitudinal study. When the research team went back 5 years later, 3 companies were out of business. 3 out of the 4 stagnant companies no longer existed. So does environment make a difference? It certainly does, because organizations run on idea power. And if the environments don't support that, then you're not likely to be successful over the long term. These are the factors on the outside: the vision, strategies that are used, leadership, how work is organized, the nature of the work, the individuals and their personalities, the work setting that you're in, the context, military versus corporations, not-for-profit versus for-profit, the values that drive that organization. All those factors impact that climate. But there's one of these, and I'm sure you can guess, one of these has a more profound influence than any of the others: leadership. If you look at the other factors that are there, why do you think leadership has the most profound impact? Sets the tone, and it influences some of those other factors. They tie into leadership. Most profound influence, from the research that I've read, anywhere to 40 to 70% of the psychological atmosphere, 40 to 70% is directly related to leadership behavior. It's what you do to set that tone. Now this comes, and I wonder if we can translate this into the military, but this is best practices. This is actually worst practice. What managers do to undermine creative thinking. Managers who do not understand why creativity and their employees' ideas are important, so they just don't see the value of creative thinking. Managers who do not believe that their employees can produce useful ideas. Managers who do not believe that something can be done concerning creativity and ideas. And I'll share, this will be my ending story for you. There was this best practices research came from a corporation, Delphi, automobile components manufacturer. And in Delphi, they have now what they refer to in management training as managers being facilitators of creative thinking. And part of that, one of the things they do is they refer to as the 3-meter rule. The 3-meter rule means, as a manager, you need to encourage those people who are the closest to the problem to solve the problem, because they're going to come up with the best solutions, because they understand the problem. They're the closest ones to it. They're the experts. Well, this management practice had a very positive impact on performance. And here's one story that underscores that. When they went in to do this research and find out why this company was being so innovative, they were interviewing various people, and there was an employee on the line who came up with this idea for a persistent problem, a persistent manufacturing problem. And the problem was this. There was a part, there was a machine that had an arm that would come over and pick up a part, swing it over to another machine that would drill it. So it would pick up this kind of cylindrical part, drop it into the machine, it would be drilled, and then it would move along. Well, what would happen is it would pick up this part, drop it in, and sometimes if the diameter was too small, that part would slip into the machine and jam it. It would break down. So there were downtime. It was very costly. They figured it would cost them, this was in Europe, about 1.5 million euros a year, because this problem was happening across the company, wherever this particular machine was in place. Well, this employee came up with this idea for solving that problem. When the arm came over and closed on that part, it would close to the specifications of the diameter, but it wouldn't close any further. So if the part was too small, guess what? It wouldn't pick it up. And therefore, it wouldn't fall in and jam the machine. Very simple solution. So this researcher said, wow, this is a great solution. Saved the company 1.5 million euros across the company. When did you come up with this idea? And you know what the employee said? I had this idea 5 years ago. The researcher said, well, why didn't you share it? You know what the employee said? Because nobody ever asked me. Nobody cared. But when this new management practice came in, managers seeing themselves as facilitators of creative thinking, somebody asked me. You know what? That's the exact same thing that this former enlisted man from the Navy told me yesterday. That's the reason why he left. Because he felt like he had ideas that were just never tapped into. So the message I would leave you with as leaders is to do what you can to create that environment that, when it's appropriate, to have ideas come forward, to tap that knowledge, to encourage it to come out. And that's it for me. I thank you for listening to me. We're going to take, what, a 15-minute break? Skipper, 15 minutes, and then we'll go to the seminars. So thank you.